In the heart of Cambodia, hidden for centuries beneath the jungle canopy, lies a city of stone. Its walls stretch for miles, its gates tower above the forest, and at its center rises a temple unlike any other, the Bayon. From its towers, hundreds of faces gaze outward, serene, compassionate, eternal. Some say they are the faces of the Buddha. Others believe they are the face of a king. That king was Jayavarman VII, a man who rose from exile to save his people, a warrior who defeated invaders when all seemed lost, a visionary who rebuilt his empire not only with armies and temples, but with compassion. He was a king who believed that power was not enough, that a ruler's duty was to heal the suffering of his people. Jayavarman VII's reign marked the zenith of the Khmer Empire. Under his leadership, Angkor became one of the greatest cities on earth, a metropolis of stone, water, and faith. But his story is not just about triumph. It is also about sacrifice, ambition, and the heavy cost of greatness. This is the story of Jayavarman VII, the God King of compassion and power, whose face still watches over Cambodia today.
To understand Jayavarman VII, we must first understand the world he inherited. In the 12th century, the Khmer Empire was vast, stretching across much of mainland Southeast Asia. Its capital, Angkor, was a marvel, a city of canals, reservoirs, and temples that rivaled the greatest capitals of the medieval world. But beneath the grandeur, cracks were forming. Rival claimants fought for the throne. Provinces drifted toward independence. The empire's enemies, the Cham to the east, the Vietnamese to the north, the Thai to the west, watched closely, waiting for weakness. The Khmer people remembered the glory of Angkor Wat, built by Suryavarman II, but that glory was fading. The irrigation systems that had once fed millions were faltering. The throne was unstable. The empire was vulnerable. It was a kingdom in need of a unifier, a leader who could restore its greatness. And in the shadows, a prince named Jayavarman was waiting.
In 1177, disaster struck. The Cham, fierce seafarers from what is now central Vietnam, launched a daring naval invasion. Their warships sailed up the Mekong River, across the Tonle Sap, and into the very heart of Angkor. The Khmer capital was unprepared. The Cham stormed the city, looting temples, burning palaces, and slaughtering defenders. The king was killed. For the first time in centuries, Angkor, the jewel of Southeast Asia, lay in ruins. Imagine the shock. For the Khmer people, it was as if Rome had fallen, as if the heart of the world had been torn out. The empire that had built Angkor Wat now lay humiliated under foreign occupation. But from this chaos, a leader would emerge. A prince who had lived in exile, a man who had waited for his moment. His name was Jayavarman.
Jayavarman was not a young man when destiny called. By the time of the Cham invasion, he was already in his 50s, an age when most men of his time were preparing for retirement. But Jayavarman was no ordinary man. He had spent years in exile, watching from afar as his homeland suffered. He had studied, planned, and waited. And when the Cham struck, he seized his chance. He rallied the Khmer people, forged alliances, and built an army. He was not the obvious choice, older, less glamorous than other princes, but he had something they did not: experience, patience, and an unshakable resolve. Jayavarman was a reluctant prince, but he became the leader his people needed. And soon he would prove himself on the battlefield.
Jayavarman's moment came in a battle that would decide the fate of the Khmer Empire. On the waters of the Tonle Sap, Khmer and Cham fleets clashed in a naval battle so fierce it was immortalized in stone carvings at the Bayon. The Cham were skilled sailors, but Jayavarman's strategy was brilliant. His ships encircled the enemy, cutting off their retreat. Arrows darkened the sky. Spears clashed. The waters ran red with blood. When the battle ended, the Cham were defeated. Angkor was free. It was not just a military victory, it was a rebirth. The Khmer Empire had been humiliated, but now it had a savior, and that savior would soon be king.
After years of war, after the humiliation of invasion and the triumph of liberation, the Khmer people turned to their savior. In a grand ceremony, Jayavarman VII was crowned king. The coronation was more than ritual. It was a rebirth of the empire. The parasols of royalty shaded him, the drums of Angkor thundered, and the courtiers bowed low. For the Khmer, this was not just the crowning of a man, it was the restoration of hope. Jayavarman was no ordinary monarch. He was already in his 50s, an age when most rulers of his time were nearing the end of their reigns. Yet he was just beginning. His vision was vast, his ambition boundless. He would not only rebuild what had been lost, he would create something greater. The coronation marked the dawn of a new era. The Khmer Empire had found its king, and the world would soon witness his transformation of Angkor into the greatest city of its age.
Unlike his Hindu predecessors, Jayavarman VII embraced Mahayana Buddhism. For him, kingship was not only about conquest, it was about compassion. He saw himself as a bodhisattva, a being who delays enlightenment to help others. This belief shaped his rule. He built more than 100 hospitals across the empire, where the sick could find healing regardless of wealth or status. He ordered the construction of rest houses along highways so travelers could find shelter and food. He expanded roads and bridges, binding the empire together. In the 12th century, while Europe was still fractured by feudalism, Jayavarman was creating what some historians call the world's first welfare state. His empire was not only powerful, it was compassionate. For Jayavarman, compassion was not weakness, it was strength. By caring for his people, he bound them to him. By relieving suffering, he legitimized his rule. His empire was built not only on stone and steel, but on mercy.
Jayavarman's greatest creation was Angkor Thom, the great city. Enclosed by massive walls and moats, it was a city designed to awe, to inspire, to proclaim the glory of the Khmer Empire. At its heart stood the Bayon, a temple unlike any other. Its towers were carved with more than 200 faces, serene, smiling, all-seeing. Were they the faces of the Buddha? Or were they the face of Jayavarman himself, merged with divinity? Perhaps both. The Bayon was not just a temple, it was a statement, a declaration that the king was everywhere, watching, protecting, guiding. His face was the empire's face. His compassion was the empire's soul. To walk through Angkor Thom was to walk through a vision of order and power. The gates were guarded by rows of gods and demons, locked in eternal struggle. The avenues led to the Bayon, where the king's face gazed down. It was a city that embodied the universe itself, with Jayavarman at its center.
Jayavarman did not build only for himself, he built for those he loved. Prohm, dedicated to his mother, was a temple of devotion, its walls inscribed with her name. Preah Khan, dedicated to his father, was both temple and monastery, a place of learning and worship. Bante Chmar honored his generals, the men who had fought beside him in war. Each temple was both personal and political. They were monuments of love, but also propaganda, reminders that the king's devotion extended to family, to allies, to the empire itself. Today, Prohm is famous for the trees that grow over its stones, roots twisting through walls. But in Jayavarman's time, it was alive with monks, scholars, and worshippers. These temples were not ruins, they were living centers of faith and community, built to endure for eternity.
Jayavarman's empire was not only built of temples, it was built of roads, bridges, and institutions. He ordered the construction of a vast network of highways stretching hundreds of kilometers. Along these roads, he built rest houses every 15 kilometers, safe havens for travelers, merchants, and pilgrims. He built hospitals staffed with physicians and supplied with medicines. Inscriptions describe them as places where the sick could find healing, regardless of wealth or status. This was revolutionary. In an age when most rulers cared only for palaces and armies, Jayavarman cared for his people's welfare. He believed that a king's greatness was measured not only by the size of his empire, but by the well-being of his subjects. For the Khmer people, these roads and hospitals were more than conveniences. They were lifelines. They were proof that their king was not distant, but present in their daily lives.
Jayavarman did not forget the Cham invasion. He launched campaigns that crushed Champa, bringing its lands under Khmer control. The empire reached its greatest territorial extent, stretching from the South China Sea to the borders of Burma. The conquest of Champa was both revenge and strategy. It secured trade routes, expanded resources, and proved the might of the Khmer army. But it also came at a cost. Wars drained the empire's strength, stretched its resources, and demanded endless labor from its people. For Jayavarman, conquest was necessary, but it was also dangerous. Every victory expanded his empire and deepened its burdens.
Jayavarman's queens, Jayaraja Devi and Indra Devi, were not silent consorts. They were scholars, patrons of Buddhism, and political partners. Inscriptions praise their wisdom and compassion. Jayaraja Devi, his first queen, was deeply devoted to Buddhism. She encouraged her husband's embrace of the faith, shaping the spiritual direction of the empire. After her death, her sister, Indra Devi, became queen. She was a scholar, a teacher, and a patron of education. She supported Buddhist monasteries and schools, ensuring that the king's vision of compassion was carried into the next generation. Together, these queens were more than companions. They were co-architects of Jayavarman's empire, shaping its culture, its faith, and its legacy.
Jayavarman VII ruled into his 90s, an extraordinary age for the 12th century. But even great kings cannot escape time. His building projects strained the empire's resources. His wars, though victorious, drained its strength. And his successors lacked his vision. By the time of his death in 1218, the Khmer Empire was still vast, still magnificent, but cracks had begun to show. The seeds of decline had been planted, even as his monuments rose toward the sky. Jayavarman's later years were a paradox, a time of unmatched grandeur and of hidden fragility.
After Jayavarman, His successors could not match his vision. The empire weakened. Enemies pressed in. The golden age faded. The roads fell into disrepair. The hospitals closed. The temples, once alive with worship, grew silent. The jungle crept back, swallowing stone. Yet even as the empire declined, Jayavarman's monuments endured. The Bayon still gazed out with serene faces. Prohm still whispered his devotion. Preah Khan still stood as a monument to his father. The empire fell, but the king's legacy remained.
Today, Jayavarman VII's face still gazes from the Bayon, serene, compassionate, eternal. He was a warrior who saved his people, a builder who reshaped his empire, a Buddhist king who turned compassion into policy. His reign was the zenith of the Khmer Empire and the beginning of its decline. But his legacy endures. In every hospital he built, in every road he paved, in every smiling face carved in stone, Jayavarman lives on. He was not just a king. He was the embodiment of an idea that power and compassion can coexist, that greatness is measured not only in conquest, but in care. And that is why, centuries later, we still remember Jayavarman VII, the God King of compassion and power.